when oil was discovered in Iran, Churchill described it as a prize from fairyland beyond our wildest dreams.
Thanks to Winston Churchill, the First Lord of the Admiralty, he changed the British fleet from coal burning to petroleum-based, and this was a life-changing moment for the world because it made petroleum as important as it is today.
Under the original agreement, only about 16% of the oil revenue was supposed to be given to Iran. But that 16% was going to be calculated by the British, and no Iranian would be allowed to look at the books. We now know also that the amount was calculated after the oil company paid its taxes. Now, the oil company was owned by the British government, so when it was paying taxes, it was essentially paying taxes to itself.
We weren't handing over files. We weren't handing over accounts, which they asked us for. I said I had no authority to hand them British companies' accounts unless I was told from London.
حتی یک لوله 4 اینچ 5 اینچ کشیده بودن از زیر رودخانه کارون هدایت میکردن به اون طرف به عراق بنزین مجانی برای مصارف خودشون و نیروی دریایی انگلیس و غیره اونجا مصرف میکردن.
So it was a lot of creative accounting, but in the end it was clear that almost all the money from this tremendous resource was going into Britain and almost none was coming back to Iran.
Well, it became very obvious that something was going to happen in Abadan, and it was nationalization.
The long, smoldering Iranian nationalists made clear their intention to seize the oil industry and expropriate the British company.
Focal point of Iranian unrest, however, is the government, headed by 70-year-old Premier Mohammad Mosaddegh, whose single purpose is oil nationalization.
دولت انگلیس می‌خواهد با همون رویه قرن 19 با ملت ایران رفتار کند. امروز هیچ ملتی نیست که بخواهد استقلال و آزادی او دستخوش اغراض دول استعماری بشود.
He was a marvelous politician, and at that time he had all the people with him. He'd clobbered the imperialists, he'd nationalized the oil company. Iran was a country again. It was great stuff. It was very moving.
When the flag of the oil company goes down and the Iranian flag goes up, this was seen both in England and Iran as a declaration of independence.
Every single heart in Iran throbbed a few beats faster at the pleasure of seeing this, what they saw as a smack in the face to the British.
And I said that if we don't do anything about this, within 5 years we shall lose the Suez Canal on the same principle, which in fact proved to be exactly right, almost to the day.
The 16th Independent Parachute Brigade stands by to proceed to a foreign destination. The inoculation of the 1st Battalion Parachute Regiment strengthened rumors that the airborne sharpshooters might be sent to Persia to protect British nationals employed there by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company.
We had a date to see Winston that night at about 11:30. Ah, he said, Drake. Swaying slightly, I think he'd had a good dinner. And he said, have you got a pistol, Drake? I said, no, sir. We're under martial law in Abadan. A pity, he said. You can finish a man with a pistol.
And HMS Mauritius standing by in the Shatt El Arab River. Such pictures tell the story of the oil crisis pretty clearly.
We had the cruiser out there and she had her guns open range across the refinery. And the problem arose, were we or were we not going to take Abadan?
Two members of the delegation going out to Persia for talks on the oil crisis, Mr. Jackson and Mr. Elkington, are seen about to leave London Airport.
The mission is going out to Persia to talk to the Iranian government with the utmost goodwill.
Were the negotiations face-sailing for the British?
Yes, they had to go through the motions. They wanted to oust Mosaddegh, regardless of whether he signed a favorable agreement.
Our policy was to get rid of Mosaddegh as soon as possible. We didn't think he'd do any good to Iran.
We thought that when Mosaddegh came in, that it would be relatively easy to get rid of him.
Back to report the failure of his efforts to solve the oil crisis comes Mr. Richard Stokes.
And just as soon as this obstacle in the way of providing...
The talks collapsed, and the British evacuated Abadan, expecting the refinery to shut down.
Abadan, where the last group of British oil experts passed through the customs en route for Iraq and home.
من اون موقع ناخدای چیز بودم، قایق موتوری بودم به نام زاغی، چوبی بزرگ بود. گفتن بره کارشناسا رو میخواد ببره بصره، از بصره پرواز کنن برن. گروه اول که اومدن، وقتی که اومدن دیدم همه من ایران میخندن. اینا ناراحت شدن، هو زدن به ایرانیا. هو بعد کپتن ناوی که ایستاده بود روبروی آبادان بهشون گفت keep quiet.
دولت ایران حاضر شد همون قراردادی که این متخصصین داشتن امضا.
Right up to the last moment, Mosaddegh did not want the British employees to leave. They would receive the same treatment, if not better, as far as salaries were concerned. And he kept on saying to the British, let us keep your employees as our employees. They said no.
Many leaving a lifetime of service behind them as they see the liquidation of 50 years' magnificent achievement in the hospitable soil of Persia.
The return of the refinery's general manager, Mr. Ross, made headline news.
The reason we left Abadan was because the Persians kicked us out and nobody did anything about helping us.
What do you think about this Persian situation with Mosaddegh? What's the true story?
Well, I think the true story of that is his strength is our weakness, and that's just it.
And what do you think about this evacuation generally?
I think it's a debauchery. Absolutely. A debauchery.
Abortion.
Debauchery.
Did the Persians take our threat of force seriously?
I don't know whether, did we threaten force?
Will you tell us, are there any European patients left in the hospital?
No, no European patients at all. There are no British people left in Abadan now.
In the 2 years following the evacuation of Abadan, the British tried everything they could to destabilize the Mosaddegh government. The refinery itself was sabotaged to prevent Iranian engineers from operating the machinery.
There was no question of violent resistance, but extraordinary how pieces of plant would go wrong just when they were supposed to be doing something else, you know.
The British took their case to the United Nations.
The Iranian oil dispute comes to New York as Persia's Prime Minister, Dr. Mosaddegh, arrives by air to put forward his country's case.
And the International Court at The Hague.
The present actions and threats of the Iranian government may render it impossible to execute a judgment in favor of the United Kingdom.
Both judgments went in favor of Iran.
Je suis très heureux de venir en Amérique pour défendre devant le Conseil de sécurité la cause de mon pays et j'en suis bien content.
He had a great impact on America because don't forget that the Americans, most of the Americans like to talk to a man who has charisma. And Mosaddegh had that charisma. He had his own convictions. Yet in politics, he was an actor.
Truman and Mossadegh had a good personal relationship. Truman had told the British that Iran had sovereign rights that deserved to be respected, and that the United States had offered millions and millions of dollars in aid.
I think a decision from our government, a full-blooded one, would have stopped all this.
And you honestly feel that if we take a very firm hand from the start...
Yes, in fact, I go so far as to say if Churchill was there, it would never have been tried.
Churchill was re-elected as a tough warrior who would sort out Iran the way he had sorted out the Nazis.
Never shall we lose our faith and courage, and never shall we fail in exertion and resolve.
A global blockade was enforced to prevent Iran from selling its oil on the world market.
The embargo was always an important part of our maneuvers to bring Mosaddegh to reason and a sensible settlement.
Persians think that by nationalizing oil, they are going to get rich. Unfortunately, the reverse will be the case.
And as the economic situation worsened, the better it was for us.
The longer our policy of denying him his success continued,
the more the Persian people would be disillusioned. And the more they were disillusioned with him, like with any government, the more chance there was of his disappearance.
Are you saying that there was no possibility of him selling this oil across the counter because you'd sewn up the outlets?
And we put advertisements in most of the newspapers of the world saying that who bought Persian oil bought a lawsuit.
Not a very democratic thing to do.
I think when you're attacked, you defend yourself. You don't think of democracy in those terms.
To cap it off, Time magazine named Mosaddegh Man of the Year, beating out Churchill and Eisenhower, who were also up for consideration.
It's a double-edged article. He is described as actually the crazy man in the mountain. They even call him the richest man in Iran and stuff, which is completely false anyway.